Okay, Lydia, next question. In your excellent book, Hidden in Plain View, let me show this. I really recommend people buy this. I love going back to, you know, some of the older apologists and looking at some of their ammunition for defending the faith. And we just want, if it's not new, we just want to toss it out. But in your excellent book, Hidden in Plain View, you talk about undesigned coincidences in the New Testament. Your book's titled Hidden in Plain View, Undesigned Coincidences in the Gospels and Acts. Can you give us a brief overview of your thesis and how undesigned coincidences can give extra ammunition for the Christian apologist in defending the faith?
Yes, it's a very exciting thesis. I call it undesigned coincidence, an incidental interlocking that points to truth. And I wish I'd thought of that phrase before I wrote that book. It's not in the book. I only thought of it afterwards. An incidental interlocking that points to truth. You'll often find a statement in one of the Gospels, and then it will intersect in a very casual, subtle way with something that's stated in a different Gospel. And sometimes one will raise a question, the other will answer the question. Or between Paul's letters and the book of Acts. So I'm just going to give one example. There's many, many more in there. When Herod is speaking to his servants, I mentioned this earlier in our discussion, this is the lead-in to the beheading of John the Baptist, which is told as a flashback. Herod's got a guilty conscience about having John the Baptist beheaded, and he hears about Jesus, and he sort of superstitiously says, this is John the Baptist risen from the dead. That is why so many mighty works are done by him. Now, only Matthew records that he said this to his servants. That's unique to Matthew, even though Matthew resembles Mark verbally in the rest of the passage a lot. So we could think this is just an embellishment that Matthew added. If you wanted to take a historical critical view, he wanted to make it seem more vivid or something. To whom was he speaking? Oh, he said it to his servants. But we actually have confirmation that the servant in Matthew's household was connected to the Christian movement. We have this in a completely different book that answers the question, how in the world could Matthew possibly know what Herod was saying to his servants? In Luke 8, he's in the early verses listing some women who went with Jesus and ministered to him and gave him money. And he lists Mary Magdalene and several others. And one of them he lists is Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager. So now we know how the Christians had a connection to the inner circle surrounding Herod. This is not Luke's account of the beheading of John the Baptist. It's a completely different context. It is beyond the realm of belief, really, that either Luke or Matthew deliberately engineered this incredibly subtle casual intersection by making it up to make it look true. And it's funny, we were talking about the synoptic problem earlier. Recently, Dr. Lacona did a video with his friend Kurt Yaros, and I have not seen it, but I have been told that in it they implied that we should kind of avoid or be very hesitant about undesigned coincidences between the synoptic gospels because of Markan priority. Well, now, if they had read my book, I mean, it really sounds like they haven't read the book, because that one I just gave is between two of the synoptic gospels, but Markan priority would not undermine it. In other words, Matthew could be making use of Mark as what we sometimes call a pony to make it easier, to write his own gospel. And still, if he knew that Herod was speaking to his servants, he could have inserted that. So that's evidence of independent knowledge. And I talk about the synoptic problem repeatedly in that book, Hidden in Plain View. So I'm not unaware of this. And I think perhaps that there's a caricatured concept out there of what I think, that I believe that the Gospels are the synoptic Gospels are totally independent, that they're not dependent on any common source, they're not dependent on each other, they're utterly, and then it's just a coincidence, when they have verbal resemblances or whatever. And I've had to clarify this multiple times. That's not what I think. So, we find a lot of these undesigned coincidences, and they're wonderful. The ones in Acts take longer to explain, so I won't try to do those, but they're even more fun in some ways. What they show is that the authors are reporting the facts and have good access to the facts, and they're not changing things. They're not massaging truth. these coincidences sound like oral history. If you ever chat with somebody who is a veteran, say, and you hear him talk, he'll just mention these casual things, you know, and then they can fit together with some casual thing that someone else mentions in a natural way. That casual accuracy is an excellent mark of truth.
Yeah, we see that in law enforcement. I mean, J. Warner Wallace, cold case detective, myself, 10 years of law enforcement on a military base. And there were a lot of times when somebody would say something, I'm thinking, that's not believable. And I talk to another guy, and he gives me a little piece of information that connects the dots. I think one of your examples, if I remember, it's been a long time since I read the book, but where the Jewish religious leaders say, hey, yeah, he's claiming to be the king of the Jews. Well, that's a threat to Pilate and to Rome. And Pilate's the governor. And it's like, in one of the Gospels, it just moves on. It's like, wait a minute. Shouldn't he, but another Gospel comes in and says that, Jesus tells him, look, my kingdom is not of this earth. He's basically saying, look, Pilate, I'm not a threat to your little political power game here. I'm here for other reasons. And
That's right.
And so, but just having a question raised, and then you get the answer from another account, and it shows. And by the way, too, myself and Farnell on our independence theory, we have a lot of common intersecting knowledge that we see before the gospel authors wrote. We just believe they wrote independently. They might have had sermon notes. They certainly some of them knew each other. They talked with eyewitnesses. So there'd be a lot of dependence outside of the actual writing of the gospel. So we're not saying that it's like, totally independent there.
There's one thing that I think about with like Dr. Fernandes, he's got specific ways he tells certain stories or preaches about the deity of Christ. And if several of his students were to get together, or several of his students were to go like to different places, let's say somebody's going to go do a talk in Seattle, someone in LA, and someone in Florida, we could not necessarily prepare together, but we would, if we were explaining Doc's thesis, we would end up saying certain phrases almost identical, like even sentences purely identical to exactly the way Doc would say it, because we have studied under him, and that's the language that we use when we're explaining that concept. So there we have, in a sense, we're all studied under him. We know how he thinks. So then, if we're all going to go do that talk, like I said, we're going to do some of those same ideas and senses, even though we didn't prepare. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like,
yeah.
Along
I think
that
that's
line?
what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, although I didn't come with examples in my pocket, the narrative itself has verbal similarities as well as the words of Jesus. So that's an interesting argument for some other kind of literary independence that may be going on, which is why I'm not close to a version of Markan or Matthean priority. It's interesting. Sometimes you'll see somebody who holds to Matthean priority that wants to make Mark disappear as an independent witness. So that's you can flip it, But I don't think you should make either Mark or Matthew disappear as an independent witness, even if you hold that one of them might have had the other document in front of him.
Yeah. Okay, and now you recently authored another book that you said it's titled The Mirror and the Mask?
It's called The Mirror or the Mask.
The Mirror or the Mask.
Mirror or the Mask, Liberating the Gospels from Literary Devices is the subtitle.
Good deal. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, and I wish I had a copy of it to hold up, but it's not in print yet, huh?
It's not. It's in what we call ARC, Advanced Review Copy. And so it's out to potential endorsers, blurbers, reviewers right now. And we're finding errata. My husband is so good at finding errata. It's been through so much copy editing already, and he's still finding additional errata. Where he's like, hey, you spelled afterward ARD instead of ORD.
Oh no.
Oops, So I'm giving him a few more weeks to do that before I send my errata list to my publisher. I hope this will be coming out before the end of 2019. It's to be called The Mirror or the Mask, liberating the Gospels from literary devices. And in this book, I accomplished two tasks. First, I answered very thoroughly the arguments that Dr. Lacona, Craig A. Evans, even, I'm sorry to say, Craig Keener, and others have made for their conclusion that the Gospel authors sometimes made deliberate factual changes in their stories. So I go through the arguments. They claim to have arguments. I go through the arguments in great detail. I go into the Greco-Roman literature, and I've even refuted the case there. I've gone back and read Plutarch. I've read Sallust and Tacitus and Suetonius and these kinds of things. So I have a whole section on Greco-Roman literature. And then I go into the gospel examples where they say we just see these literary devices, these fact-changing literary devices in the Gospels, and I refute that, I answer that. So anybody who reads this book will discover that these theories don't hold up well to scrutiny, and in fact that there's evidence against them. Then second, I present a nuanced but robust model of gospel reliability. I call it the reportage model. And this does not have to mean inerrancy necessarily, and although it's compatible with inerrancy, it's could be inerrant. And it does not have to mean that we have every single word of Jesus verbatim and all these, straw men. I say, no, that's not what this means, but it's a very robust model of reliability, and I make a positive case for that. I bring up additional evidence, even beyond what I have hidden in plain view, that the Gospels are what I call historical reportage. So I do bring in undesigned coincidences that it would be remiss of me to leave them out, but I have other evidence, positive evidence as well. So those are my two tasks, is refuting this contrary view piece by piece and step by step, and then presenting and defending the reportage model of the Gospels.
How many pages?
It's long. The current printing, which I think will be accurate and better because I've done the indexes already, is about 545 pages.
Okay.
But that includes appendices. You don't have to read the appendices. Okay. There's 3 appendices.
I might skip them. I might skip the appendices, but I definitely got to read the book. So you just created more work for me, and I'm grateful for it. But no, that sounds like a must-read. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about Dr. Norman Geisler, because Chris Hahn, one of our colleagues at International Society of Christian Apologetics, was a good friend of Dr. Geisler, and he was actually reading portions of, because you gave him a manuscript copy, and was reading portions of that book to Dr. Geisler. And of course, Dr. Geisler went to be with the Lord on July 1st, and this is just July 16th, so just over 2 weeks ago. And I was in Europe at the time, so I missed his funeral, and I'm really bummed about that. And but Chris Hahn was reporting back to us, the IACA guys, saying how impressed Dr. Geisler was with your work, and with that specific work as well. And I'd have to talk to Chris Hahn, but I believed he was really moving in the direction where, had he lived long enough, he probably would have endorsed it. And so I was going to ask you just what your view is. I mean, you either love him or you hate him out there sometimes, it looks like. But what's your view of the late Dr. Norman Geisler and his ministry? And just out of curiosity.
Yeah, he was a polarizing individual. Maybe he didn't want to be in some ways, but he was. What I appreciate about Dr. Geisler is his clarity and honesty, which are 2 words that you've been using here in this interview. One person who knew him personally, I had never met him personally, but one person who knew him personally said to me he was the fairest man I have ever known. He was the most fair. And I thought that was interesting, that I like that, that he didn't say he was the sweetest man I've ever known. He said he was the fairest man, that he was trying to evaluate things fairly. The more I've investigated, the more I've come to think that that's a true evaluation. I also appreciate the fact that he was not afraid to harmonize the Gospels.
Amen.
And he didn't see that as irrational. He saw that as a very rational thing to do, because he was very committed to reason. Dr. Geisler was very committed to reason. And I also appreciate the fact that he was a warrior for the faith. We don't, like military metaphors anymore nowadays. Call somebody a warrior, maybe that's considered not nice enough or whatever. But we need warriors for the faith. And the Apostle Paul says, contend for the faith. Yeah. And that was something that Geisler did, and that role is very needed. I really do believe that he was going to endorse the Mirror of the Mask, and Chris was going to be visiting him. Chris has told me I can say this. He was going to be visiting him right now. And because even though his mind was still sharp, reading presented some difficulties for Dr. Geisler. So he was going to be reading large portions of it to him when he visited him, and the Lord took him home before that could happen. So we'll see what happens. But Dr. J.P. Moreland and Dr. John Warwick Montgomery, whose inerrantist credentials are second to none, have both endorsed the Mirror of the Mask.
Oh, praise God! I'll be seeing J.P. out in late October. We're going to be speaking at the same conference, so it'll be great to see him.
Grotice is the one that Grotice is at, too?
Yeah, the one that Grotice and
Frank Turek.
And Frank Turek will be there, too. Yeah. Yeah, with Dr. Geisler, what I found over the years is that he was the best friend you could have. There's been a few Christian thinkers who unfortunately had moral failures, and he never abandoned a friend. He was always there for them. He didn't condone what they did, but he was always there for them. Sometimes he even erred on the side of grace. But when it came to either the essential truths of the Christian faith, he would smash heresy, had no patience for that. But when people claim to be evangelicals and inerrantists and then are not really being honest, he didn't have much patience for that either. But he'd probably be the first to admit that there were times when he was probably not the best spokesman for a specific, kind of like John Adams. I've heard, I don't know, I haven't confirmed it, that Thomas Jefferson wanted John Adams to write the Declaration of Independence. And John Adams' response, and I'm paraphrasing, is, "Look, dude, we want somebody to sign this thing." And so it was kind of like he ruffled too many feathers, but he was a godly man. I can remember going out to eat with him after speaking engagements. And if I were sitting down next to him, he would just pat me on the back gently, and I got the impression that, he was pleased by my uncompromising defense of the faith. He saw the potential in me, but I also got the impression he was praying for me. But I just want to let you know that he greatly admired your work, and he respected your scholarship. And now, do you think Dr. Geisler was wrong to be alarmed that evangelicals who claim to be inerrantists yet embrace what would normally be considered errors in the biblical text?
I think he was quite right. He had worked hard to define inerrancy, to work with the Chicago statements both on biblical inerrancy and biblical hermeneutics. And then there were these institutions that used those statements. They would say, we hold to inerrancy in the Chicago statement sets or something like that. And so like parents, if it was a college, or people, potential pastors, if it was a seminary, they thought they knew what they were getting. This became part of, if I may so call it, the branding of an institution. So then if they were going to use that as a brand for their institution, and he was the author of some of these things, and he had worked hard to define it, he didn't want that to then be undermined. Yeah. That was, in some ways, his life's work, and it frustrated him. Yeah. I think there's this very strange notion that if you hold on to a word and you change the meaning of it, you're entitled to have people just move with you. Yeah. I mean, I've actually had to write to people in email and say to them, well, I'm here to help to clarify things. I'm not here to help to obfuscate. So no, I won't use that euphemism. Yeah. So like the word paraphrase or something, or narrating out of order. I define all of these in the Mirror of the Mask. I had someone write to me and say, well, maybe, Michael Lakota is a little confused about this, but couldn't you write about it as if he's not? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm here to help people understand. So I think that was what frustrated, understandably frustrated Dr. Geisler, because once we start engaging in that kind of word magic, it's not clear what sort of controls there are on where we're going to go with that and how far we're going to go with that.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous too when you have statements of faith, and then because there's a different consensus, rather than just change the statement of faith and say, okay, we no longer hold to that, let's just redefine the word. I think of the Evangelical Free Church with the word imminency, because they were pre-trib. Now I'm post-trib. Mm-hmm. And so some of their pastors and scholars became post-trib or mid-trib. So what they did, instead of changing their statement of faith, they just redefined the imminency, that Jesus could return not at any moment, but in any generation. And to me, that's just dangerous, because what can we do with a word like deity? You know,
Yeah.
So no, I agree with you 100% on that. Okay, now these are just things out of curiosity. Out of curiosity, do you accept the Pauline authorship of all 13 of his letters? And then what about Moses as the author of the Pentateuch?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
Although I've done more work on the Pauline authorship issues and the New Testament issues than the Old Testament issues. Probably, the very end of Deuteronomy. It records the death of Moses. That's probably Joshua. By someone else.
Yeah.
I think that's still considered a very conservative position.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Joshua wrote that, and it amazes me that how honest you are, because as someone who's not an inerrantist, it seems like there'd be a temptation to jump on the bandwagon. And if other guys who claim to be inerrantists are now throwing out this stuff and the historical Adam and Eve and the Mosaic authorship, but I like that you're diligent in your studies, and you're not going to use that as, hey, I got a ticket now to just throw out large portions of what inerrantists have believed throughout the centuries. Instead, you're dealing with each issue on a base by base, basis, and I appreciate that. Okay.
It helps that I'm not part of the guild. I'm
Yeah.
not part of,
I've heard you use that word before, and you're hitting the nail on the head with that, part of the guild. Explain what you mean by that for our listeners.
So, biblical studies or New Testament studies, I'm talking about people who regularly publish. They go to the conferences, might be the ETS or the Especially Society of Biblical Literature, SBL meetings. I'm not saying it's wrong to go to those meetings,
No.
don't get me wrong, but they're established scholars in that field, and their identity is bound up with being in that field. And so then there are certain people that you sort of want the approval of.
Yeah.
When you're there, when that's where your publishing is, that's where your job, maybe your day job is, and so forth. And so you like being part of that group. Then it can be very hard to be outside and to be an outsider. And I've definitely experienced this because since I've been writing the New Testament, especially since I've been criticizing some of these views, there have been people who've said, well, her credentials are not in New Testament, so basically you shouldn't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about or have a right to speak. So in that sense, my husband pays the bills, okay? I don't have to have a job. I don't really need anybody's approval except, the Lord's and my husband's and, that kind of thing. I'm not beholden to anybody.
Yeah.
Also, analytic philosophers tend to be extremely combative and hyper-rational. And, there's an old saying, honey badger don't care. Analytic philosophers are the honey badgers of the intellectual world. And so, we just look at somebody saying, oh, you're not in our field, and we go, what are the arguments? Where do the arguments lead? So I think that really helps. That I would never be jumping on any bandwagons because bandwagons do not attract me at all. They hold no temptation for me.
Yeah, Dr. Geisler, both in writing and in personal conversations, thought a big portion of the problem was a greater desire to please academia than to please the Lord, and I think we're seeing some of that.
Good stuff there.